here I am. What's the plan tonight? What are we talking about
We're
this morning?
talking about preparing for death.
Oh, okay then. Good idea. Okay, so
We
you're
can,
gonna go on.
can I just say that Venerable Robina edited with a handbook written by our dear teacher Lama Zopa Rinpoche called How to Face Death Without Fear. And I have a copy of the one the
The earlier version.
that's the earlier version,
Yeah.
yes.
The other one is still available on for Wisdom on digital. We've done a reprint, but it hasn't come yet as a paperback. But the digital book is still available. How to Face Death Without Fear.
Oh, okay. I didn't.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So that's it. No introduction. We've
Well,
done
we're
the.
so worried. We're just thinking about how unprepared we are for every single day, let alone death.
I know, so true, isn't
So
it?
we're just waiting here for you to
Okay.
open some doors for us. So,
Okay. So we think we're going to listen to this advice coming from Lama Zopa, coming from the Vajrayana system. It's a very specific approach, to the death. I mean, the teachings from Lord Buddha and how to prepare to live our lives is straight out of Buddha's teachings. But the Vajrayana is a particular one that explains the death process, which is quite fascinating. So if we have time, we can do that. So we just, let's just do our refuge prayer here. So we sing it in Tibetan. Sangye Chedan Sokye Chok Nam La Janchu Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drubpa Shog Sangye Chedan Sokye Chok Nam La Janchu Baru Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chernyen Gipe Sonam Ki Drola Penche Sangye Drubpa Shog. As it says in English, we're going to go relying upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha until we're enlightened. And then we're saying by the virtuous karma we create by listening to these teachings, may it be a cause for us to become a Buddha, and then we can be of benefit to others, help others. Okay, good. That's it. Perfect. So yeah, so it's we just in Santa Fe, we've been here for 2 weeks, and we did one day on that topic. And there's something about, it's okay. So there's two things, there's two approaches to it. One is how to live our life in the framework of the reality of death, and then one, of course, is to deal with the actual situation itself. So I think it's been very moving actually seeing the way in the West now more and more people are actually. I remember a conference in Bendigo or was in Ballarat or somewhere. There were all these young people were electing. It was a very lovely, really nice conference. People electing to work with the dying. It was very nice. But especially in Sydney one time, I forget where it is in Sydney. There's this children's hospital where babies and children die. And I think that's the worst one. It's unbearable for us, isn't it? And there's this lovely doctor there, Dr. Jeremy somebody. I remember there was a conference he did. More than anything was to try to bring death up into the front and not be ashamed and full of guilt and misery about it, especially when it's children and babies. I mean, we cannot cope with that one. And he was such a dear man. I remember he had I remember the morgue for the babies, the dead babies, was decorated like a nursery, and it was open, instead of all this fear and things, and all and this one little boy was walking in and out and saying, "Come and meet my dead brother." It was so sweet, the mothers and the pain and the suffering, because there's so much shame around babies dying. It was such a dear man. So it's really clear more and more these days in our for death, wanting to make it a good thing and not be afraid of it and taking care of the dying. It's wonderful. Of course, unfortunately, along with that too is more more common to hasten people's death. What's the Buddhist view then? Well, as we know very well, if we're a Buddhist, whatever kind of Buddhist, we know perfectly well the Buddha talks about our consciousness coming from a previous life and then coming to this life, and when it leaves this body, it'll go to another life. So that's a very different perspective. I mean, the Christian teaching, you come from God and then you die, and then indeed you need to prepare for the next life. It's true, which is heaven or hell, and so it's a similar approach. So so the first of all is the main one is living our life in the framework of impermanence, as we know very well. When Atisha's little text that was used as the basis for Tsongkhapa's Lamrim literature, we know very well that the very first practice, the very first one as a preliminary practice is to think about this life is this precious life, and the conclusion from it, Atisha's agenda, is to get us not to waste this life. But then the next point, the entry level into the path, the very first meditation, as we know, he gives us to do, is to think about impermanence. So Buddha's teachings on impermanence are very extensive. It's one of his first philosophical views. And indeed, meditating on subtle impermanence can even be confused with emptiness because it's so subtle. So the teachings on impermanence are huge, And this is a major teaching. What's interesting, we can see, can't we, that Atisha, he didn't just talk about impermanence in general right at the beginning. He got us to think about the impermanence of this person, meaning death. And I think his agenda, is to get a wake-up call. So you get the wake-up call first by thinking your life is precious. And already that's a brand new idea to us. We do not think that. I mean, look at the number of people in our world who kill themselves because we really, truly do not think that life has any value. It's so utterly tragic. And so, of course, the framework for us as a Buddhist is that, we know perfectly well if we're Buddhists, we've had lives as animals and bugs and dogs and hell beings in the past. And here we are like a miracle having a human body again. So, the reference point for this is to think about how fortunate we are that we have this human life. So then the first point is get energy not to waste it. But then he gets us right between the eyeballs and he gets us, not only is this life precious, but now he gets us to increase our enthusiasm, our will, our wish not to waste this life, but getting us to realize that we will die. And this is a massive meditation. The Lamas say that if we realize impermanence, just realize the reality, had it integrated into our mind, that impermanence is just the way things are and we will die, he says your life is transformed because you don't waste your life when you realize it's impermanent. So we have this deeply instinctive kind of assumption that I'm permanent. We don't think it intellectually. Our mother didn't teach us this. You don't go learn this at school, but it's deep in the bones of our being, which is why even though death is really obvious, there's kind of gross impermanence, which is the death, things breaking, things ending. That's gross impermanence. But the subtle impermanence is even more profound. But a teacher doesn't bother with that. He wants to give us a wake-up call, and he wants us to increase our wish not to waste this life. So he gets us to contemplate three main points, isn't it, about death. So the very first point we know is that death is definite. So we kind of go, well, Buddha, we know this already. Don't give us something more exciting, please. It's kind of boring. So then we sort of wonder, what do you mean by meditate on it? What do you mean by, but forget your cushion. The thing is, we intellectually know that death is definite. The very first point, we know that's true. We know in our lives, bugs die, babies die, dogs die, happy people die, old people die. Death seems to be very natural. But we don't, but it's always other people will die, isn't it? It's out there, it's distant from us. We don't like to ever think. And this is why I think it's very powerful the way to get just in daily life, forget meditating on it, but just to bring very practical views right into our daily life. There, for example, you just see a little animal or a little creature, or a little mosquito, suddenly it's alive, feeling it's permanent as well, and all of a sudden, boom, it's dead, So the real point is this: it'll never be a wake-up call for us, even when it's like, first of all, it's got people out in the world, the bugs and the creatures and the people in other countries, they die. We might get sad, we might get upset, we might get angry at the people who killed them. We never really get the real point. And the real point, whether it's the mosquito or the people in Ukraine or in those girls, that couple in DC who just got murdered, the Jewish couple, or anybody, all the time, out of the blue, it happens out of the blue, and we always get a shock. But the real way to get the wake-up call is so simple. You simply say, that will happen to me. You make it personal, because we don't want to think that I will die. Even when it comes to our beloved family, even when we get real wake-up call there, we don't get the wake-up call. We are broken-hearted, we're sad, but we've got to say, and that will be me. Then it forces us to put it right in front. Otherwise, it's always someone else who dies, because we just don't want to acknowledge it. And then we're going to analyze why we have this fear, why is it? It's just because of intense attachment, that's all. Unbelievable. Even though we think we're a creep, we hate ourselves, we think life is not worthwhile, we still have intense attachment to this person, to this body. And as Lama Zopa says, the main cause of fear at the time of death is attachment to this. More than anything else, attachment to this, So, It's something we just have to count. We have to observe the instinct, observe the kind of assumption about permanence. And even though it's not expressed out, it's not expressed intentionally, it's just in the background of our mind. We have an assumption. And what we're really saying is we don't want to die, but we kind of conflate it with thinking, I won't die, you know. And then the second point gets a bit closer to home, and that really could freak us out. It should. It should really give us the wake-up call, you know. And that is the time of death is not certain. And this is really clear, but this we do not want to know. We are maybe prepared to accept I'm impermanent and that I will die, but it's always a long way off, isn't it? You think about it. So the way to get this idea of being a feeling impermanent, a feeling, I mean, we know very well, you look in the mirror, you know you're getting older. You know, each day goes by, you're getting one day closer to death. You know, each day you're getting older. We can see it, and we know intellectually it means we're moving towards death. But because we can't cope, we just don't think it. So it's good, you've got to use simple examples, you know. For me, it's like, you know, when you drive somewhere, even like you go from anywhere, even five kilometers. You start off, you drive, and there's home behind you. And as you're driving, you've got this real feeling, don't you, of moving away from home and going towards the office, let's say, or towards the shop. You have a vivid feeling of moving forward, away from home, closer to the shop. Well, that's how we've got to think about our life. So we wake up every morning feeling exactly like we felt yesterday, feeling this permanent solid me, exactly like we felt 50 years ago. It's still me. Okay, I'm wrinkled, but we don't have a feeling we're moving towards death. And that's what we have to have. And we've got to get used to that idea. We're moving towards death. And it's not meant to be fearful. It's just a fact. So it's any method we can use to change our thoughts is what's necessary. But of course, the key point here is we think, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Why should I think that? Let's make me more fearful. No, when we live in denial of something is when there's fear. If you face the fact of it, the fear has gone, you know, and then everything changes. Everything changes. I remember one woman one time in one class, she said, I live in fear every day that my husband will die, you know. Every day I'm afraid that he'll die. So often the first thing we say is, oh, don't be silly. Of course he won't die. But that's stupid. Of course he will die. I said, well, you know what? I said, you know what? You say to yourself, well, he will die. But then what do you think is not panic and fear and hold on to him, but simply and that's the point of our teacher's getting, when you realize he's impermanent and you realize he will die and you don't know when, then time is precious, then you don't waste it. You don't waste it. You've got a sense of urgency, you know. So the other problem is we just live in denial of it all and just plod along like idiots, never even thinking about impermanence. Or the other extreme is we live in panic every day thinking about death. Neither is relevant, neither is valid, neither is useful, you know. The reality is impermanent. Buddha's key point about everything, his main trip, is that we've got these layers and layers of misconceptions in our mind, and they are literally the main cause of our suffering. So you can look at the attachment, the emotional afflictions, they cause us suffering, but the impulse to believe I'm permanent causes suffering. The impulse to believe there's no karma causes suffering. The belief that we're made by our mother and our mind is our brain is causing suffering because there's not reality. Buddha says getting in touch with reality is the method to get happy. That's his main point, from impermanence to karma to compassion all the way to Buddhahood. It's a really interesting point. So why we are living in fear is because we're not in touch with reality and we're massively attached, and then we have grasping at permanence. And these two go really close together. You know, we can see that in relationships. You know, and this is where, yeah. So I always use the example of, I always quote Nicole Kidman. I love the woman, but I always use this example when she was with Tom Cruise. I always mention this. I read in Vanity Fair 20 years ago, whenever she was with Tom Cruise. And this is a really good point. This is that when everything's going well, when attachment is getting what it wants, when life is lovely and life was fantastic and they loved each other, they had their family, their kids, their lives. And most of us, if we're fortunate, our life is like that pretty much. We go home every day, the house is still there, hubby's still there, things are still there. So we tend to take it for granted. And then because attachment's getting what it wants, this is very powerful, we all do this, because attachment's getting what it wants, we think because it's nice now, it will be nice tomorrow. That's how we dump permanence onto everything, because basically we can't bear the thought that it might change. So we cling on to it. So all I know is that Nicole Kidman at the end of the interview, it was very moving. She said, we will be together until we are 80. Now we know what she means. We know perfectly well it's not true. You can't guarantee it because we're not clairvoyant. And even she said, next sentence she said, and if we won't be devastated. At least she acknowledged it. And that's how we all are. So because something is nice now, so because, and this is the point, because I'm living now, because I'm a living person with no sickness, then of course I'm going to be living tomorrow. We say that. When we hear about a person dying, we say, oh, but how could it be? I just saw them yesterday. As if somehow they should be, and that's what grasping at permanence means. It manifests like that. You believe it instinctively that because it's nice now, it'll always be nice. And this is also the tragedy. When indeed for her, joking about Nicole Kidman, indeed Tom, it did end and she was devastated. Then what happens, I'm not saying her, but what happens when attachment stops getting what it wants? Now we shift to believing that that will never end and we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's why we kill ourselves. This is the tragedy of seeing things as permanent, and it's based on having intense attachment. So they're just misconceptions, Buddha says. He's not trying to make us scared by thinking about death. It's just finding a method to accept the reality, and then everything will change because of that. Then we won't waste our lives. Suddenly you'll have a perspective. You'll be focused on what's important. It sounds like a joke, but when we have a deadline, when you know you've got a certain goal, you've got to be at the airport tomorrow, or you've got to, leave the house in a month, or get a new job, or go somewhere, some radical change happens, you galvanize into action. Suddenly, if you've got to get to the airport tonight for a flight, you don't start having a fight with the next door neighbor or suing somebody or deciding to paint the kitchen walls. I mean, you've got all the jobs. This is the interesting point. When you've got a deadline, you're focused only on the things that are necessary to get you to the airport. Well, that's how to think about death. You're on a road to death, So because you don't know when you don't know when that phone call will come. You're on that old-fashioned one of being on, what is it, on what do they call it, on standby. You never know when the call will come. You got to be ready. Your bag has got to be ready to go, and then you focus on what's necessary. It's very clear. We know that. But if you never think death will come, then of course you're not going to prepare for it, and of course you're going to think it's a long way off. No worries, because we cannot bear the thought that the time of death is not, I'm going to die soon, because we don't believe it. And I say these words 1,000 times, editing Lama Zopa's teachings, like all of you heard it 1,000 times, but I do not believe. I believe I'll wake up in the morning. It's so ingrained in us, even when you're old, we believe it. We know this. So we accept it, but we have to counteract it all the time, remind ourselves of how foolish. The reason to remember death again is impermanence, it's not to fearful, it's to wake us up, to give us a wake-up call. And the crucial point, of course, is not to waste this life. And in Buddha's terms, what that means is based on karma, that we know every millisecond what we think and do and say produces the person we become. Every millisecond what we think and do and say produces the person we become. So when we know that, we don't want to waste time by sowing stupid, dumb, negative seeds in our mind, fighting and yelling and killing and screaming, getting depressed and unhappy. We only want to sow positive seeds, because when you die, a bit late, You want the decent seeds in your bank vault. That's the energy behind this. So if you're a materialist, you have a philosophical materialist view, then you don't continue. But at least you have a sense of urgency not to waste what's here now, because it's good. At least die with a happy mind. That's better than nothing. But the Buddhist view is it's crucial because it's up to us. We're not the product of we're not the handiwork of a creator. We're not just waiting to be rewarded by somebody. It's up to us to sow the seeds in our mind, virtuous seeds that will ensure our very next life. We've got to create it. It's not going to be given to us by somebody else. We're not somebody else's plan. We've got to make sure we put all the right seeds in our mind, in our garden, so we get the fruit we want. And the more we think about karma, the more of a sense of responsibility we'll have. That it is up to me to make sure I put the right seeds in my mind, so that when I do die, I'll have the seeds available, because I want another decent human life, So as we know from the Lamrim, there are different goals. So forget emptiness, forget nirvana, forget Buddhahood, forget bodhicitta. If we could just have this sense that we know The most basic thing is we know we want happiness. We know we don't want suffering. So what happiness means in the simple sense in terms of a life, we know we want a nice, decent human body. We want nice tendencies in our mind. We want nice experiences, and we want a nice, healthy body and where nothing bad happens to us. That's a happy life. That is a happy life. So to begin to understand that that is what we have to cause. We have to cause that. It's not given to you. You're not created. It's not someone else doing it to you. It's not your guru going to do it for you. Oh, I'm sure Lama Zopa will take care of me when I die. Yeah, I'm sure he will, but I've got to create the karma. I've got to sow the seeds. So what comes from the view of karma is a sense of responsibility. It's up to me to put all the right seeds in my mind. And then you add impermanence to it. Then, of course, you don't want to waste time. Why would you? You have a sense of urgency. And then you are positive and focused and have less fear and less attachment and less feeling of wasting time. This is a crucial point about it. So you make sure that you've got the right karmic seeds, and then if you live your life every day like this, then you are creating and you're purifying every day and living in vows, which is the very best way to practice. These are the main techniques we've got to ensure that when we do die, we'll die happily, we'll die a good condition, and the right karmic seeds will be triggered, which happens at the time you stop breathing, which we'll talk about. So then, and you just then are programmed. You go to the bardo, and then your new mother's waiting, and she gets have sex with your daddy or whatever she does, and you hop in and off you go again. So we've got to organize it, and that's the thing that I felt working on this book of Lama Zopa's really helped me see this again, kind of renew this sense that it's up to me to make sure I program my mind properly. It's up to me. And that also means I have to decide what kind of life I want. This sounds very hilarious to us, We say, oh, well, whatever's best. Well, I'm sorry, if you want to go on a holiday, you don't say, oh, I'll go wherever's best. You can't get an air ticket to wherever's best. You've got to decide Australia, Italy, and then you buy a ticket. I really mean that. Or we say, whatever's best. I'm bugger that. You've got to decide. And you know what? There are two options. There are only two options. One is another decent human body. And you get that with decent tendencies, no thought to kill, steal, or lie, good experiences and good environment, and you get that from living in vows, the 5 Pratimaksha vows. That's it, baby. Live in your vows and purify every day. That is the cause of getting another good human birth and good conditions. But you've got to practice generosity as well. As Lama Zopa says, the main cause of getting a human body is non-killing, practice on the concept of vows, but you need lots of generosity karma. Otherwise, you get born with a good body and a good mind, but you've got to work 18 hours a day for a bowl of rice. That's no good at all. So you've got to decide, and this is it's really important. You all know if you want anything, you have to have the thought, I want that, and then you will do it. So you can't just say, oh, I think, as like I said, I'll go wherever's the nicest place for a holiday, and I'm going to go on the 27th of January, and I keep every day I say I want to go to the best place. Well, 27th of January comes, and what have you done? Nothing. You haven't bought an air ticket. You won't go anywhere. I'm sorry. So you've got to know where you're wanting to go and then get the right air ticket. And I'm really not kidding. So what's this Pure Land business? I know when I always thought Pure Lands were totally boring. I didn't want to go there. So stupid rubbish, So I know that anyway, when I was doing this book of Lama Zopa's, Rinpoche had the stroke a few years before, and I know he'd given his first teaching, and Venerable Holly, his attendant, sent me rough notes of he'd given the Amitabha Buddha empowerment, and a few teachings on it, and the benefit of wanting to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. And then suddenly it made sense to me, and now I'm a fan, and before I go to sleep, I do this prayer by Tsongkhapa of wanting to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. But the crucial thing is why? Why would you want to go there? Well, there's a chapter in Rinpoche's book that says, pray to go to Amitabha's Pure Land. The only reason to go to a Pure Land, and let's discuss it in a minute what it is. I haven't got much time, but we'll do our best. What is a Pure Land? Okay, the reason to want to go to Amitabha's, and Rinpoche says that Amitabha Buddha says that one of the few Pure Lands that ordinary people can go to go to other Pure Lands, you mostly need a realization of emptiness. And we don't have that. But Amitabha Pure Land, Amitabha promised, it seems, that anyway, to have virtue, you have virtue, so this is where Rinpoche said in the book, that Tsongkhapa says, you want to go to a Pure Land, pray to go to Amitabha's. But the reason to want to go isn't just to be having fun, like hanging out. The reason is because you can get enlightened quickly. So they have discussions about that. Rinpoche's different gurus have different views. And he says, that Kirti Sencham Rinpoche says you can't get enlightened there. You've got to come back and be born as a human and practice Tantra to get enlightened. But his other guru, my root guru, says you can. So never mind. But the reason to want to be born in a Pure Land is very simple, is because you're going to be having a subtle light body. You don't need to go to have boyfriends and toilets and food and dramas, and you can only listen to Dharma day and night and get enlightened very, very quickly. The key reason, at least from the Mahayana point of view, is with bodhicitta, to want to get there and just whiz through quickly and get enlightened quickly, and then you get reborn again where you're needed. So that to me seemed very practical, because I like things going fast. So I thought, good, I'd like that. So now every day I go to sleep, I have my prayer on my iPhone, and I hear this aspiration. About 10 minutes I say the words, to myself, to go to Amitabha's Pure Land, to create the cause. So Lama Zopa says the first cause, and this is my point, is I want to go there. The first cause of getting an ice cream is you want one. The first cause of going to Sydney is to want to go there. And then you create the causes. It's very practical. This is the meaning of karma. The meaning of karma is the word intention, mental action. Everything starts with intention, not motivation, but bare bones volition. I will. That's the meaning of karma. So the more we understand that, so then you have to aim, I want a human body, and if you want a human body, well, you better create the causes. So creating the causes means you live in vows of non-killing, non-stealing, non-lying. Very first level of practice, take refuge and live in vows. And the point about that is that, as Rinpoche points out, the power of vows, and this is what Lord Buddha's teachings, are so tremendous that taking the vow, which in a sense means you're defining yourself as a non-harming person, and you vow every day, I will never kill, I will never steal, I will never lie, and that your mind stream becomes imbued with those powerful decisions. That's 1 billion times more powerful than occasionally not killing, because all the rest of the time you're not thinking about it, you're not creating non-killing karma. And just to get a human body, you need the karma of non-killing in your bank vault, delicious, rich, intentional, non-killing karmic seeds. And the quickest way to get multitudes of them is to live in vows of non-killing. Vows of non-harming. It's got much more power, because 24 hours a day you're living in those vows, you're dropping delicious karmic seeds into your bank vault, and they also purify all 4 ways that karma ripens. So if you look at the human world now, 7 billion, as a result of non-killing, get a life as a human, but most of them continue to have a tendency to kill or get killed or die young at all aspects of killing. But living in vows means you'll get a human body, you'll never have a tendency to kill, you won't get killed or die young, and you'll be fat and healthy, and the environment will not harm you. And we need that, plus the meeting of the Dharma. And then live in vows and purify. This is the most powerful way, the most rich, delicious, powerful way to live your life. And then connect to the Dharma, practice every day, and want to continue to meet the Buddha. These are the causes of you getting another decent human body with a decent human condition so you can move on your path. That's that one. Simple. So if you want that, aim for it, want it, and then you have to create the causes, create the conditions. It's so clear, Now, if you want to be born in Amitabha's Pure Land, in a sense the same thing. Want it every day, pray for it every day, create lots of morality, have lots of bodhicitta to be born there. But do the same thing. Live in vows, practice morality, and aim for being born in Amitabha's Pure Land. And then see if your merit is enough when you get there, So you live your life like this, with a sense of urgency, knowing that you are creating yourself every second. There's a powerful sense of responsibility that comes from the view of karma. You're not someone who's very strong in our mind. You become responsible. This is the best way to live your life, knowing you could die. And the point is, knowing you could die today. And that's a fact. Unless you're clairvoyant, and most of us aren't, we can get clairvoyant if we practice, shine, shamatha. You don't know when death will come. As much as you think you do, you don't. And as Lama Zopa says, we're so ridiculous. We think the world is divided into living people and dying. And we always think we're a living person, even if we're old and wrinkled and with a walking stick. I'm a living person. It's so bizarre when you think about it. It's got it hasn't got an atom of rationality about it. It's completely ridiculous. So when you hear about a dying person, look how we think. You don't even want to touch them. You don't want to even look at them. You don't want to even you don't want to have even a conversation with them, because you sort of think they're not a real person. Oh, they're dying. I mean, they haven't got a future. It's so bizarre how we think. So we have to remember we're dying people. Don't go on about it. I say it to my sisters and they think, don't be ridiculous, Ring, you're not dying. Because we don't know, but I am. So you'd think you are, and they get a sense of urgency. That's the point from it. So the second point is the time of death is uncertain. And that means we could die. And Lama Zopa basically says the best way to think is I could die today. The best way to think is I could die today. So I said to that woman, think, yes, my hubby will die, and I don't know when. So then that should galvanize you into action to make the most of the relationship. Love him, don't waste time, don't fight, don't be ridiculous. You use every second well, and you go to bed and he's still breathing in the morning. It's a bonus, and you do the same thing again. Same with yourself. Same with yourself. So you really have a sense of urgency, and it's a good urgency, not neurotic. It's a good one. This is how to live our lives, being responsible, knowing it's up to me. So when you do die, you will be ready, and you won't live in fear because you've practiced becoming familiar with it. You'll be ready. So then there's the whole question of the death process itself, So this book of who's listening, but you can't write the book for a dying person because you need to help them. So the whole book is in reference to helping your loved ones die, helping your loved ones die. And that includes your so the book is actually quite fat. 2/3 of it really is all these techniques, all Rinpoche's endless practices, all these sutras and things. He's got so many practices and loves mantras, bhajan, and many sutras and many different things that he thinks are really marvelous. All his practices are like that, but they're all divided. First of all, the book's in chronological order. From about part 3 on, it's all what to do when. First, months and weeks before. So the assumption is we're talking about a person who's dying slowly, months and weeks before, days before, hours before, minutes before, at the time the breath stopped, the 3 days after the breath stopped, and then when the mind leaves the body, and then the 49 days after. It's chronological. And there's so many things we can do to help others. So the key one in terms of helping a person, is to make sure the environment is really peaceful. It's something that's kind of like, because you see, we have the 5 senses, don't we? And if you're sick and you're dying, you're very fragile. Your mind is getting more sensitive. Your mental consciousness, and you're very fragile, and you're easily affected by the smallest sound or whatever. So it's to really make sure the environment is peaceful. Because the key point that Rinpoche makes the whole time, he says, first of all, if you want to help anybody in this life when they need you most is right then at the time of death. And it's for a very practical reason, because at the time of death, and we're going to discuss this now, from the Vajrayana perspective, the technical description of the death process, it's described in great detail in the Vajrayana teachings. There's some very good books about it as well. So Rinpoche says that why we need to help a person at the time of death more than anything is because it's at that time when the death process starts, and we're going to discuss it, and that means soon after the process starts, when the senses start ceasing, the various components of I kind of deconstruct, it's then that the karmic seed that will determine your next life from the billions of karmic seeds in your bank vault is triggered. And the key point is this: there are negative karmic seeds in that bank vault, and there are positive ones. And it's very obvious we want the positive ones to be triggered. And the condition that enables a person's peaceful, they feel safe, they feel comfortable, and the crucial point, of course, is they can hear and see the representations of the Dharma, because this is the most powerful imprints on their mind, So that means we have to understand karma in order to understand how that can be. And this is good for our pets. And it needs to be peaceful, because when your mind is peaceful, this can help your mind activate virtue. And when your mind is stressed or freaked out, we know that activates delusions and panic and anger and attachment, which is a disaster. The last thing you want at the time of death is that, So the most precious gift you can give is just to be there, just be there like a rock of Gibraltar for the person. Because we all know, you see, don't we? We all know that fear is so tremendous. It's primordial. Everybody, they say this fear is so powerful because we all have enormous attachment to me, and particularly to this body, this thing we cling to, So there's various things he says. The very first one is have the condition to be really appropriate, peaceful, beautiful, and everything in that room should be for the benefit of the dying person. And what that means is whatever their senses can contact should enable their mind to be peaceful and virtuous. So if they're a Buddhist, you'd have Buddhist mantras playing, you'd have their practices, you'd have images of their gurus or the Buddhas, or if they're Christian, you'd have Jesus or whatever works for their mind. You really should know the person well and then put things that can energize their virtue, not their attachment. And that's the thing in our culture. I don't think we can distinguish much between attachment and, say, virtue. So we think, oh, they love nice music and they like their dog and their cat. Oh, that would make them happy. But this distresses their mind. Completely, you've got to realize what attachment does. It distresses a person's mind and increases the wish not to let go of it, you know. The pain of it is incredible. So you've got to be very skillful in making the room beautiful and peaceful. I know when a friend of mine, Trisha, Venerable Trisha Donnelly, an English nun, I just remember she died 8 years ago, and I remember it because she was born in the same year as me. We're both born in the year of the monkey, 1944, and she's dead, you know, so it'll be my turn any minute. And my friend Margaret up at Chenrezig, she died too. She was also a year of the monkey. She died as well. So, you know, it's my turn soon. Anyway, Trisha was Trisha was in Australia. She worked for years as the director of the centre in Bodh Gaya. And she had some kind of virulent cancer, and she rang Lama Zopa. He said, yeah, just get ready for death. No point in trying to fix it, you know, it's too close. So she found a place in Queensland near Chenrezig that was beautiful, like Bali. It was just utterly beautiful, beautiful buildings, very open and sunny, and the big vast views of the sky. That's the kind of environment. Because if you know, sick rooms are horrible places. They're dark and dingy and messy and junk everywhere because we think it doesn't matter. But you know, if you're even though you're dying slowly and you've still got a mind and you have senses, so everything should feed your senses to make you peaceful. Beautiful sounds, sweet smells, nice views. So your mind is, when you open your eyes, and your mind is spacious and you see mountains in the sky. It's so obvious, but to make really beautiful. But when they're never like that, and quiet. Everything should be very intentional. The things you say, the things you listen to, everything should be for the purpose of benefiting that person, to help their mind be virtuous and peaceful, so that when they are ready for death, their mind is completely ready, you know. It's such a crucial job. So, of course, this is a problem too about the noise, you know. I don't think we pay attention to this. I think, unfortunately, in spite of the fact that doctors and nurses are so kind, the worst place to die is a hospital. Because especially if you really are dying and that means your mind, you know, you're much more fragile. Your mind is much more sensitive. You can freak out at the smallest thing, you know, because your mind is more sensitive. Your grosser level is ceasing and you're going more towards your subtle mental consciousness. That's what's happening. So you're much more sensitive. The smallest sound, the noise, but in hospital, doors and banging and people, other people's emotions, it's the worst place possible. You've got to really try and help your loved ones die in a peaceful place. And of course, then we think, well, let's drug them out and they'll be okay. But no, even though you're on drugs, it can make your mind so distressed, you know. We know, you see, the subtle mind, gross mind is your sensory consciousness. And when you're alive and wide awake and wound up, all your senses are very alert. But as you're getting sicker and older, your senses are becoming more dull and you're getting closer to your mental consciousness, which is all your thoughts and feelings. And of course, your dream state, dream mind, the mind of a coma, that's your mental consciousness, but in a much more spacey kind of way, you know. And so when you're in a coma or asleep, you can be very vividly aware even of all the externals. There's no question. I remember a friend in Sydney years ago, I visited when I was staying in Ashfield, and she was in that hospital. What is it up there on the west coast, up on the other side, the north side? What's that hospital? That skinny bit in Sydney that goes up to the beaches. What's that called? That's a hospital there. Big hospital on the north coast. Anyway, do you know what it is? Never mind, never mind. But I know it was about 50 kilometres to drive there, so I had to drive. I drove at night through Fenchurch Forest, so you can drive quickly, you see. So I went to see Judy every night. Her husband was a judge. And I said I was coming, and he said, please come and see her. She was totally in a coma. And I remember he said that this Buddhist nun was coming. And then when I got there, they were a bit nervous. They said, please don't ring bells. So I promised I wouldn't. So anyway, I'd be there late at night because she could drive fast at night. And she was in a complete coma. And she was very close to Songsar Khyentse Rinpoche and Sakya Trinzen. So I'd asked their disciples to get the lamas to pray for Judy. So every now and again, I'd say in her ear, Judy, Songsa Kensei Rinpoche is praying for you. Judy, Sakya Trinzen is praying for you. She was in a total coma and they didn't expect her to come out. Well, weeks later, she came out and she told me that and she didn't know it was me, the only thing she remembered was this husky voice. She thought it was a blue lady coming through the window saying exactly those words. Now, you can't make that up. I never told anybody. I never said a word to her husband. It's the only thing she could find in her mind, those vivid words. That's the power of the holy beings. So having the Buddhas, having mantras, the sense, the ear consciousness is so powerful, and that's the most precious way you can help. Your animals, the bugs, the moth, the guinea pig, all the beings have quietly the sound of mantras blessing their mind. This is the most precious gift you can give, and that brings the Buddhas, which helps the mind be peaceful and activates their virtuous karma. I mean, of course, Rinpoche is a total fan of all this. That's his thing. But this is the way, if you Buddhists, this is the best way you can help your pets and your grandma. So keep it peaceful all the time. And the whole business of drugs is really unfortunate. Often we think, oh, look at them, they're so peaceful because you're on drugs. Not true. You know very well you could be fast asleep, looking peaceful, and you wake up and you tell your hubby that you had this nightmare. So you weren't peaceful at all. Just because you look like a quiet, drugged out of your brain, your poor mind's having a mental breakdown, having complete hallucinating, having terrible experiences, especially, and drugs really affect your mind. I'm not saying not to have, but we've got to really be conscious of this. And just because a person looks quiet doesn't mean their mind is peaceful. We don't talk that way at all. We've got to find the way, yes, the drugs, but have the in peaceful environment. And if they're on drugs, have the mantras playing so it can seep into their consciousness. This is so important. Animals as well, I tell you. Peaceful. And the other thing is, if you're in control of it, if you're the boss of the environment of your mum, and you're the one who calls the shots, then you really be very clear about who you allow into that room. If there's some people who are like angry and fighting and they have dramas and upset your loved one's mind, you do not let them see them. You keep the pets out. That's very shocking for us, because that it's attachment. It just increases their attachment. We think attachment. We don't even know attachment in our culture. Oh, she loves her pet. Look at her, so happy. No, it just grasps. It increases your attachment, and that's the worst way to die when you've got attachment. You want to be relaxed and peaceful. You want to have quiet space, because you're so tired and exhausted. You want to be able to go inside, not have things disturbing you all the time. All your loved ones coming in and telling they love you. Thanks a lot, very happy, but back away, give me some peace. You've got to know what you want. I mean, Tricia was very clear. She didn't want this, she didn't want that, she wanted this. You'd be in charge yourself. You've got to know the person's mind well, what they want. And don't be like some guy, some Buddhist, who every 2 hours would wake up his wife from her sick, dying state and make her do her practices. Excuse me, give the woman a break, do her practices for her. Come on. So the key thing, so there's a whole section in it. You've got different scenarios. You work at, maybe you die at home, maybe you die in a hospital, maybe you die suddenly, maybe you die, but you give your organs. So these different scenarios. The practices are all the same in a way, but it's each of these scenarios. What to do if I die at home? If someone dies at home, what to do if one gives their organs? These things. So there's different practices. So at least if home is the best where you can control, unless you're rich and have your own private room and you can call the shots, and live there for 2 weeks. But the idea is to at least be able to stay for 3 days, because they've found in this system that it's at least 3 days before your subtle consciousness, your mental consciousness leaves the body. At least 3 days after you've stopped breathing, which is your sensory consciousness ceasing. So to be really playing on the safe side, So the best one is so you can have that time. But if you're in a hospital, as this Rinpoche says, even 30 minutes, do what you can, prayers and practices, And then it'd have to take the body. So like when my sister died in Sydney, I came home, where was it? Melbourne. No, she was in Melbourne, that's right, a couple of years ago. And she died and I was able to get there. They kept her, breathing. And it was so funny because all my sisters, my brother and my sister, the 7 of us, Jan was in the bed dead. She was she was breathing. But as far as all they're concerned, they're not, she's dead, she's dead, Robina, I know. I said, but keep her breathing so I can say mantras in her ear. But they didn't care about all that. And so they had her dressed up in her Sydney swan Guernsey. They had a Sydney Swans scarf around her neck, and they were all singing the Sydney Swans football song, And I couldn't run the. I mean, I was not in charge, so I couldn't say shut up, be quiet, or leave. I said, "Can be some silence here, please?" I tried to whisper mantras into Jan's ear. I couldn't do much, because I wasn't in charge. So if you're not in charge, you do the best you can. If all the fighting over money, over your father's dead body, you can't stop them. But if you're in charge, then you could call the shots and say who can come in and who not. And that's everything that happened. So basically, everything that happens in that room should be for the benefit of the dying person. You've got to think that way, and have the view of karma, understand the mind when it's more subtle, have it peaceful, and know that playing mantras and prayers is the most powerful gift you can give. The most powerful gift you can give, And so there's lots of other practices too, like when they're still alive and put their wits about them, what you talk about, what to say to them, what to discuss. So one of the most powerful ones, of course, is let's say your mummy's a Catholic. But you know that she's got faith, but she hasn't talked much about God, and it's not very in the front of her mind. You don't shove it down her throat, but you talk to her. Mummy, I've been talking about God lately. God loves you. Are you looking, and that kind of thing. So you get her to think about how God loves her. Think about God. It's the same as saying the Buddha, Think about heaven. Tell her. And one of the key things Lama Zopa says is that attachment, you can use it. So one of the functions of attachment, which is the pain of suffering at the time of death, you cling to something and you don't want to let go. But another function of attachment is to look forward to something. Well, you can use that. You can tell your mother, well, mummy, heaven is beautiful. I've been thinking about heaven lately. God loves you. God's waiting for you. And she can shift her fear of losing this to anticipation of going to heaven, which is a very nice feeling. It's very skillful, he says, to use this view, to transform your attachment, And the same if you think about karma. It's practical, or think about future lives. So another point here too is that I think it's helpful. Instead of thinking I'm preparing for death, you are, but what you're really preparing for is the next life. And that puts everything in a different perspective. Because hearing, you've got to, death is simply what you have to go through to get the next life, which of course means you've got to have confidence in this view of karma. If you don't, then it doesn't help you. So you've got to cultivate that. And as I said before, living your life in the context of karma is that view. And you've got to, and you really, if that's meaningful to you, you use that skillfully. And of course, it takes time because we're so clinging and believe in this person with this shape. It's too vague for us to think of another life, but it can be helpful. Looking forward to your future life, which means you've got to make sure you create the causes for it. Have this, so this loosens the grip of this fear of losing this one. It helps your mind. So before I talk about the death process according to the Vajrayana, are there any questions about what we've discussed so far, or what to do, or how to help during this period of the person dying? Are there any thoughts, questions, people?
Yeah.
Yes.
Hello, Venerable.
Hello there.
Yeah. There's
How
so
do I spell your name?
there's so many
How do
Engkong.
I? Eng.
Remember
Okay.
me?
Eng Kong is your name. Your mummy calls you Eng Kong.
Yes.
Good. Okay, I'll call you Eng Kong. Go on.
Yes.
Talk.
Call me
Go on.
Engkong. We have
I'll do
met
that.
before, and we've
Oh, good. Okay,
been
fantastic.
emailing each other.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I should be calling you. You call me. Should be calling you Doctor. So I'll call you Doctor. Come on.
No. Engkong will
Okay.
do. Yeah.
Okay. Go. Okay. Go on. Talk to me.
Venerable, there's so many good points you raise, and there's so much I want to ask you. But what comes to mind straight away now is, this concept of there's no time to waste. We want to make good use of. Is that related to? Is it a Theravadan Pali word, Saṃvega? Saṃvega, I've been told, has to do with our sense of urgency to follow the path, because
Yes.
that is burning. Everything is burning, and
Yes, that's exactly the same. That's like
the same.
this here is from the first stages of our Lam Rim, which is the teachings we share with the Theravadan path. Of course it is. It's exactly the same. This is all
Same.
straight from the sutras, straight from the teachings you hear in Burma or Thailand. We always say in the Lam Rim, the teachings of the first and second scopes of the Lam Rim are the teachings we share with the Theravadan path. They're the exact same teaching. So exactly that. Exactly. That's
Thank
exactly.
you.
It gives us a sense of not wanting to waste because we want to get, because drive our renunciation, that's exactly right. Exactly that. And it can transform our lives thinking this way. We suddenly have things in perspective, We grasp at things less, we give up anger more easily. There's not, why waste your time, No, it's very true. It's exactly that.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I look forward to you coming to talk to or later this morning or your evening, the Bardo states.
What about it?
I look forward to you talking about it soon.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You said earlier on in your presentation.
Exactly what I'm going to do. Okay, I'm not going to give much detail, but I'm trying to explain what it is and put it in kind of framework that makes sense to us. So the Vajrayana, okay, let's discuss this now then. Okay, this is based on the Vajrayana model of the universe, which basically is that, and it's the same, is the universe consists of matter, which is made up of the four elements, earth, air, fire, water. And then there are minds, billions and billions and trillions of consciousnesses, mental consciousnesses, kind of mental continuums, rivers of mental moments. Consciousness is going from life to life to life. So according to this Vajrayana model, our minds are inextricably linked with these four elements, a particular subtle level. So according to the Vajrayana, we've got gross consciousness, which is the sensory consciousness. And clearly that is inextricably linked to the gross body. I mean, this is the grossest way our karma manifests. Our four elements are manifesting as a very gross body. So the grosser level of our consciousness, which is sensory, is dependent upon the existence of a body. So the way we would say it in the materialist view is your eyeball, the nerves and blah, see something. No, the Buddhist view is your eye, your sensor, your eye consciousness, which is your mind, which is not physical, works in conjunction with the eyeball, the nerves, the blah, blah, blah. And so then you have a cognition of shape and color. Ear consciousness is that part of your mind that functions through the medium of the bits and pieces and the ear and the drum and the blah, and you can have a cognition of sound. So the first level of death in this is described in 8 stages of kind of great deconstruction of about 25 components. So the first of the 8 stages, the various components that cease to function, the first one is the form, the first of the 5 aggregates, form. Then the second is the earth element. And the indication of this is that the body feels very kind of weak, like it's sinking, much less power, much more weak. The eye consciousness ceases. And there's there's a set of 5 wisdoms they refer to. And so one of them is this function and they're related to the senses, this mirror-like wisdom, which is things look kind of, this mirror-like wisdom enables us to have to see a lot of things clearly. But as this starts to go, as the eye consciousness goes, then it's kind of things become cloudy and vague, So the earth element, form aggregate, mirror-like wisdom, and then the last one is there's a subtle sign, they say, that the great yogis who've practiced are familiar with, is this interplay, if you like, they say it's like a mirage, and this is really the interplay of earth and water. There's a subtle sign that's the indication that we're already in the starting of the death process. Then the second stage, the feeling aggregate, and the feeling of the kind of of pleasant and painful and indifferent kind of merge. There's less distinction. And then the ear consciousness, and related to that is this a feeling of equanimity of those 3 feelings. Then the ear consciousness ceases. You can't hear so well. You're less clear, still a little bit. And then the 5th thing is the indication, this sign, is the interplay of the water element, and the next one, which is fire, kind of like it's like smoky. This can happen very slowly over several hours, or if it's a violent death, it can all happen very quickly. So the great yogis, of course, have practiced in all their lives going through these stages, identifying these stages and having control over it. And it's also done in conjunction with our deities, with our sadhanas. There's a chapter in the book called Death is What the Yogis Have Been Waiting For. So the third stage is, okay, by this point, your form and your earth element have ceased, and the mirror-like wisdom has ceased, and the eye consciousness. The thing is, though, these also, by the way, this is exactly the process we go through every time we go to sleep. You know, when you're sitting there talking to a friend and your eyes are kind of glazing over and you can't see very clearly because you're so tired, the energies are absorbing, you know. Then the second time, you miss that last 10 seconds of what your friend said because your ear consciousness is beginning to stop, beginning to cease. This happens. So this deconstruction process. The third one is now form feeling recognition, and the other one is the aggregate is a discriminate. The other one, the other state of mind, discrimination. So you can no longer distinguish between this and that. Your beloved boyfriend's on one side of the bed and your worst enemy is on the other, and you can't tell the difference. You're gradually losing the plot, you know. And then at the same time, the fire element and the nose consciousness cease, and there's like a vision of sparks. So it's about this point, it's second and third. There's another whole set of things now. There's the 12 links of dependent arising. So they play a very specific role at the time of death. So this is happening in tandem. So to the second and third stages of this process, the seventh link is kicking in, and that seventh, I think, or eighth, is craving, which is very powerful attachment. And that's when the enormous fear, extra fear comes as you're dying, as the process is starting. Incredible attachment kicks in, and you grasp tremendously powerfully at this one, at me. The fear of losing it is so tremendous. Then the next one that comes is called grasping, which is an even heavier level of attachment, and it's that grasping is what triggers the number 2 link, which is the karmic seed of one of the billions of karmic seeds you have dropped into your bank vault over countless lives. The way you die, so the grasping is going to happen no matter what. But if you're with your beloveds and you're practicing Dharma and your mind is peaceful, then you can still manage. That grasping is the trigger for the karmic seed. But if your mind is virtuous, that'll trigger a virtuous karmic seed, and the one you want best is non-killing, because that's the cause of a human body. So already by that point, you already have triggered the karma. Already you've programmed your mind for your next mother. And they say the way you die, and it's evident because you've still got your wits about you, and because this is when the karmic seed is triggered, and if it's a negative seed, then you're going to die incredibly, death will be very fearful. You'll freak out, you'll be screaming, terrible things can happen, because what's happening is your grossest consciousness is ceasing, and that means your mental consciousness, your subtle level of mind, is becoming more activated, and that's literally seeing the future. So you can literally be seeing the future suffering life, you know. This can be very extremely suffering. People are having hallucinations. They are literally seeing their future suffering life because a negative seed has been triggered. They're going to be born in the hell realms or an animal or something. Person is going to have to be born in a human realm. They will die very blissfully. They'll be peaceful. And I remember when Steve Jobs died. It was very interesting. I like Steve Jobs. I remember reading about it. He knew he had cancer, and you could tell by the words he used to say that he was really in touch with impermanence. But also, I think he had some connection with the Dharma. I know there's this wonderful, I think he's Brazilian, a friend of mine, I can't think of his name, but he's been recognized by his Lama as a Rinpoche, as a reincarnated Lama, and he's a teacher. He's a very wonderful man. I can't think of his name now. And I remember he used to do healing. And I remember reading the memoir of one of his daughters, that this day she came to visit, and this Lama was with Steve, you know. So anyway, the point is, the day he died, his sister, they'd been orphans, you know. So she came, and she said he was packed, ready to go. So in other words, he'd spent his years being ready for death. And so she said it was very moving, and I'll tell the story. She said she was sitting there, and then Steve was in front of her, and he was facing his 2 daughters. They had their backs to her. She was watching him, and she looked at his face, and she said he looked so full of love, and he was begging his daughters to forgive him for having to leave them. He didn't, in other words, I'm saying he wasn't freaking out and grasping and panicking. And then she said he looked over their shoulder into the distance, and he went, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow," and then he. All I can deduce based on this model is that he was dying very quickly. His grossest consciousness was ceasing, and he had a vision of a pure land. Let's hope it was that. So his mind was completely radiant, completely blissful, you know. I thought that was nice. So I've heard many stories. One friend of mine, a Sakya nun in Cairns, she sits with the dying. She said one person, she'd never seen anything like it. He suddenly became like this demon. His eyes were red, his eyes were rolling up in the back of his head. He was completely freaking out, like screaming like a banshee, as if he was seeing the most horrific things. And then he calmed down and then he died peacefully. And her teacher said he thinks probably that he had some kind of karma has been triggered and he had experience of like the hell realms, but he purified it and then he calmed down and then a virtuous karmic seed was triggered and he had a peaceful death and got a good life. So this point is so crucial. They say this is when the karmic seed is triggered, this period when the mind starts. And the trigger for the karmic seed, interestingly, is this intense grasping, the ninth or eighth link. I think intense grasping. So that's going to happen no matter what. But if you've got your loved one there, you're hearing your practice, you've got your practice, you're familiar with impermanence, it'll be fine. The grasping is there, and that's the trigger for the second link, the karmic seed. But the virtuous state of mind will be causing that virtuous seed to be triggered. This is why to have it quiet and peaceful is so important, so crucial, to be helping this person navigate this really crucial time of leaving this body and setting up the causes even before you stop breathing. This is the point for your next life. This is why it's so urgent. So anyway, for this Vajrayana model, we've got the gross consciousness and gross body, and that's the sensory and the physical. So when the fourth stage, which is now the fourth one, the earth element ceases, the tongue consciousness ceases. And as one Lama said, that tongue that has spent its life gossiping is now over. Is now useless. And then the breath stops, okay? Then the breath stops. And that's when we think we're ready for the body bag. And this is the point about you're not dead yet. The Buddhist view is your subtle consciousness, your mental consciousness is still there. And so the idea is not to disturb. So this is the one about organs, and I want to say that. And I will talk about the Bardo in Kong, but it's not going to be too extensive, but I'll explain it in a simple way based on this model. So your gross consciousness is your sensory. That's now ceased for sure. Now your mental, which is all your thoughts and feelings and all the conceptuality, but there are much subtler levels of conceptuality as well. We know this from the dreams. That's just mental consciousness, So what happens by this point, your mental consciousness is now happening and you're continuing to go through this deconstruction process. So you've already 5 or about 20 of these components have now ceased, and now you go to this subtle, now you're at the subtle level. So what's subtle consciousness, your mental, and now let's look at the subtle physicality, because it's inextricably, the mind is inextricably linked to some level of physicality, from the gross to the subtle to the very subtle. So now we've got subtle consciousness, which is your mental, and that's inextricably linked. You've got the subtle nervous system. This is similar to the Ayurvedic system. It's similar to the acupuncture one, and this is certainly the Tibetan medical system. You've got this subtle nervous system, 72,000 subtle channels from the entire body, and coursing, and you've got a central channel starting at the back of your head. If your spine went up, it would start up there at the crown and go down all the way. It ends at the penis for the boys and at the cervix for the females. And then there's 2 side channels that are going from here up and then go down either side, ending in the same place. Then all the other 68, whatever it is, channels all over the body, messy. So the minds, this is the model now. You've got the wind energies coursing through all those channels. And this is the basis of health, as we know, in the acupuncture and certainly the Tibetan medical system. And all your states of mind are linked inextricably with those wind energies. So you go to your Tibetan doctor or whoever, she'll feel your pulses and she'll feel the imbalance of those winds, which she's familiar with, and she knows it's related to your attachment, and that's why you're having panic attacks. So the Buddhist model of the mind is totally inextricably linked to the Tibetan medical system, So then even the greatest doctors have can see the karma too. So all your states of mind are linked to these wind energies. And this explains how karma works as well. If you have negative thoughts, then that programs your mind with that anger. At the same time, that anger pollutes the winds next connected to it, and that eventually manifests as gross physical illness. And then even long term, it manifests as external imbalance of the external elements. Minds literally create even universes. So the subtle level, this is what's now deconstructing. The various things happen at this point. They say that, so the different components of the subtle physical energy, there's the wind energy, there's the channels, and then there's this red and white drops, they say. very subtle, which are what you get from your parents at the time of conception. The subtle level of the egg and the sperm, they call the red and the white kundalini, the subtle drops. And this is what when you go to your mother's womb at the time of conception, because they say when the egg and the sperm come together, that's when the consciousness goes there and joins this, your very subtle consciousness joins this subtle red and white drop. And that's the beginning of you. It starts, and it's at the heart chakra. So along all these channels, there are these various points where they're constricted. And they are here, navel, and then three at the bottom for the male and internal for the female. So these are blocking these chakras they're called. All the wind energies, all the channels constricted. So the great yogis, when they practice, or when you're doing, shamatha, what's happening is you're controlling your mind, which controls the wind energies connected to your mind, and then they all leave all the side channels and all come into your central channel, which is what happens every time you go to sleep. And then when the yogis get their mind to even go to the very subtle level. So as you go through this process of this deconstruction, the red stops, the white stops, the wind stop, and you get eventually to very subtle consciousness, where all the physical energies and all the mental energies have all subsumed to the very subtle consciousness at the heart chakra. That's called the clear light mind, and that's the 8th stage of death. And that's the subtlest level of mind. So all the yogis have practiced getting to that point, because at that point, which is the purest, subtlest, most capable level of your mind, like the microscope of your mind, that's when you can realize emptiness and become a Buddha, enlightened, and remove all the obstacles. And these yogis can stay in that state for days and weeks, even months, the capable ones. So this is roughly the stages of death, the deconstruction of all these components. And then once you get to that clear light level, you might just still be stuck there for several days, and you not be conscious. The yogis can use that time. And then eventually at some point, the red and white drop will open and your consciousness will leave. And from that second, you then do a reverse process of those 8 stages, a reverse process, and you wake up, if you like, into this subtle state, just like a dream state. That's the bardo. So the bardo is equivalent to like the dream state. You go to the sleep process and you wake up in you go through the 8 stages and go into deep sleep, and then you do this subtle kind of reversal and you do this through the opposite end of the 8 stages and you wake up in a dream state. And we know about dreams. They'd be very, very vivid. That's your mental consciousness. And so exactly the same as the bardo, the radical difference being from the second your little drop at the heart opens and your very subtle consciousness leaves and you go through the 8 stages reverse, you wake up in this intermediate state. So of course you don't fly an aeroplane there. It's no place you can locate on a map. It's a mental state, like the dreams. It's a mental and depending on the type of rebirth that you're going to have, it'll be either like a nightmare or it'll be quite peaceful. And that bardo, it's just exactly like that. It's literally like a dream state, but it's no longer in this body and it's no longer you. Even they say you can see your own body from the bardo, but you don't recognize. The karma's finished, all over. So depending on when your mother and father hop into bed, if you've programmed yourself to get a human body, you've got to hang around in this bardo, it could be up to 7 weeks, they say. There's much more details on it, and I don't know what they are, Kong, but really the main point is to understand it's your mental consciousness without your senses. It's exactly equivalent to a dream state. The difference is it's not in this body. That's really what it is, depending on your karma, the way the karmic appearances are, whether it's fearful or beautiful or delicious. It's all depending on how you died and the future life. Do you understand me? That's the way they describe it.
So is that also the Venerable? Is that also the state where the chanting matters?
Well, that's exactly this is the whole point for this view. So first of all, there's the 3 days that your mind still can be in the body. You keep the body there. You do prayers around the clock in the monasteries. I mean, friends who are Buddhists, they at home. Your mummy died. You rotate doing your sessions because your mother's mind is right there. And there's another interesting discussion about having many people who have dreams. I had a dream one time, I did a retreat years ago, and I had these vivid dreams every day. We went to sleep, it was India during the rainy season, but I was vividly conscious of everything around me, what was going on. I didn't see, but many people have that experience. You can have that experience. So it's exactly the same with people in a coma, or even you could say in a coma, or even their breath has stopped and they're sitting in the room, that their mental consciousness is still there and they can still be very conscious of things, which is why you keep it peaceful. The only sound should be mantras and prayers. And then when their mind leaves the body and they're in the bardo now, they can be they can be really helped in the bardo. Like if a negative seed was triggered, Lama Zopa says, and they're destined to a lower realm, if you say practices and prayers in those days, that can easily reverse the karma. There's so many things we can do for people while they're in the bardo practices. And that's why, certainly in our tradition, the 49 days is the longest you can be in the bardo. Then that whole 49 days can be doing practices the whole time to influence their mind and help change their negative karma, for sure. Do you understand? But the other thing I want to talk about is what about the scenario of giving organs? This is a really important conversation, I think. So this is one of the chapters, Rinpoche's advice. So he said, first of all, he, like all these lamas, they praise the compassion that people are driven by to want to give their organs. He said, it's amazing. It's such a special thing to do, no doubt. But the danger is very specific. So I'll explain exactly what the problem is with it. Okay, what happens is this. Okay, now I remember reading this book while I was editing Lama Zopa's book. It was called The Undead. This very humorous American medical journalist talking about all the obstacles and problems and difficulties in the medical profession in the United States, directly related to the business of taking organs. Because, like we know, so one of them, for example, he talked about this. One of them was, for example, was this evidence, this experience that every culture reports of people coming back to life. This is so common. You look like you're dead, you stop breathing, you're in the coffin, and you literally come back to life. Well, this Buddhist perspective is you've gone through the process, but you haven't got the karma to die yet. You've stopped breathing, yeah, but your mind is still in the body, and the karma's still there to have life, and you do the reverse process and you come back. So, so of course in our culture, it's too hard. We don't know what to do with that. Because as far as we're concerned, the person's dead when they're brain dead. That's why then if you want their organs, you put them on the life support, isn't it? But as far as they're concerned, it's a dead person, and that's so. But the Buddha, as Lama Zopa says, if a person can still breathe and their body is still warm, that's the proof that their consciousness is still there. And this, of course, is a radically different view from the materialist one, because you can't see evidence of it. Not from the physical, of course you can't, but the mental consciousness is still there. So he had a whole chapter, this man, on people who have out-of-body experiences during their operations. And of course there's a lot of cynicism about that, but he said he joked about it. There was one woman who had to have such a radical procedure that they had to close down all her organs. And from their perspective, there was just no way in the universe she could have any awareness. Well, he said it was interesting because her experience, it was the most vivid out-of-body experiences, quoting exactly what the doctor said and all these things. And he said, you can't argue with this. So it's like interesting. And so all these experiences, he was quoting the obstacles. And he was also quite cynical, interestingly, with the industry, the elitism, the arrogance, the forcing of people to give organs. And I know now in Europe, it's now the law that you give your organs. It's the default. You have to make an extra point of saying, no, don't take my organs, So he was quite critical of the industry, the arrogance of it. Nevertheless, it's still an amazing thing, there's no question. But the point here is this. In one of the books, he quoted this woman who was giving her organs. So then she stopped breathing. For them, she's dead, but they put her on life support, or whatever the word is, And so her mental consciousness is still there. That's where we're going to take this view. So then she's on the operating table, which means virtually she's like unconscious, just like you would be under anesthetic. But her senses have ceased, there's no question. So then the nurse who was monitoring the heartbeat, he quoted her that the moment they got the circular saw to cut her open, she noticed the heart went from 100 to 200 beats a minute. And the author cracked a joke, well, what has she got to be worried about? Well, this for me is indication that she is having one of those experiences. She is still in her body and she happens to be conscious. And she's observing that they're cutting her open and she's panicking. Don't they know I'm not dead yet? So of course her heart goes to 100 beats a minute. She's having a panic attack. That's the only way to explain it, from the Buddhist perspective. So, of course, most people won't have an experience and they'll be okay. It won't disturb them. But in those cases, what will happen is because she freaks out, when she died, probably a virtuous karmic seed was triggered. She's programmed to go to a human birth. But now she's been distressed and freaked out. That can reverse the karma, and a negative, because she will then die with fright and fear that can cause her conscious to go, and it'll create and it'll trigger a negative karma, and she'll get a lower realm rebirth. So that's the one danger. That's the one danger. As Lama Zopa said in the book, they've got to be careful. He didn't say more, you know. So it's really good to think about this one. That's all. But he even said, interestingly, even if he doesn't even follow, he said, by the way, incidentally, another point, that getting your organs cut out still doesn't mean your mind has left the body. So if your loved one's heart is cut out or something and you've got the body after a couple of days, then still you continue doing these practices in case the mind is still there, and it could be to help them through that 3-day period, you know. And the other one too is if you've got to give your body up after 30 minutes, like my sister in Melbourne when she died, all my sisters left once they pulled the plug, because as far as they're concerned, she's dead. That gave me the chance to have a few hours to say mantras in her ear. And the very kind, the doctors told me I had to go now. And the Burmese nurse was very sweet, and she promised they'd move her body very gently, which is the recommendation. And then you would take them, she'd put it in the morgue, because they had to do an autopsy, and leave her in the morgue. And if her mind is still there, then you can do all your practices in the next 3 days for her. That's a very common thing to do. You can do that, you know. But the key thing is, with the assumption the mind is still there, you treat it very gently. You don't rough the body up, you know. And then there are signs, it's all there in the book, there are indications of whether or not the mind is still there. So in this process of these 8 stages of deconstruction, everything comes to the heart chakra, right in the center of the chest, in the center of the central channel where the subtle red and white drop from the mummy and daddy started, and your very subtle consciousness is joined with that. And if that's still there, if your mind is still there, if you put your hand over their heart, even on an animal, it'll feel very warm. The rest of the body's cold, and that's an indication the mind is still there. That's what they say. So there's many things to talk about. We've only got 10 minutes left, so what to do? Any questions, people? And of course, all the practices do after this. You know, many things you can do to even still help reverse the karma, you know. All the next days, we do many, many practices. But the real one, I think, the big one is to take this view that a person's in a coma or a person's asleep. It doesn't mean they're not conscious. That's the big one. That example of mine of Judy was such an example. I did not tell anybody I said those words, and she said those exactly. And she was in the deepest of comas. They didn't think she'd come out. You can't argue with those things. And this is one thing. One doctor in this industry was quoted in this book. It's called The Undead. Nick Teresi is the journalist. He said, I can say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but that I can say. So I think it's brilliant that people are questioning their assumptions, you know. I know the Dalai Lama, many conversations with all his friends in the medical world, and they're even creating machines, he joked about it, what they can put onto the bodies of the yogis who go into meditation and stay there meditating for days to see if they can find some indication of subtle life with their machines, you know. But he said there's only one machine, so when his yogis down in South India die, by the time they get it down from Dharamsala, the person's left his body and reverse, so we need more machines, he said. So it's wonderful that there's actually discussion about this. I find that's what's really helpful. What else, people? Any questions, Pete?
Venerable Robina, thank you so much for this special meeting. It
Oh,
means
darling.
so much to me. And I'm just wanting to ask about the 3 days after a parent death diagnosed by the medical profession. Should that be in your own home, or are you whisked away, unfortunately, by the undertakers?
So that's the thing, isn't it? That is an interesting point. So if you're in a hospital, if you can, this is where I said, you know, like with my sister, okay, I know in America, when Lama Yeshe passed away in America, in California in 1983, they had all these hippy-trippy laws, and we just paid $2 to the undertaker, and they gave us permission to do the ceremony at our center in California. So we kept Lama's body for days. We took it from the hospital, and we kept it for like days, 10 days, you know, and they were happy. We did pujas and prayers, but now they don't allow that. So I know in one other time in California, a friend of mine died in Santa Cruz, and the daughter and I went there, and the father he didn't want to be kept alive, but his wife freaked out when he had a heart attack, so she called the ambulance. He wanted us to do the practice and prayer. So we had him in the hospital, and so we knew he didn't want to be kept alive. So we did the prayers he wanted, then they pulled the plug, and then we couldn't take his body back home. So they were very kind, and they wrapped him up and zipped him up in the bag and took him in the ambulance very gently, and then took him to the mortuary. And then we were allowed to come, and we kept him on his gurney, and we stayed all day and did the prayers. And then we wanted to stay overnight as well, but they wouldn't let us. But that we gave them a CD of the Gyuto monks chanting, and when they put him in the fridge, they promised they'd play the CD. So all the other dead people got the Gyuto monks chanting. So we came back next day and did another day of practice. So you can do things like that, or you can keep, like my sister, they kept her in the fridge for 3 days before they did the autopsy. So that can be also fine. You can do the practices before you disturb the body. You know, there's different ways to do it. The ideal is if you've got, you know, if you're at home, or if you're like a friend of mine in Tasmania, her husband was dying and he died in a private hospital. Well, she shooed out all the doctors and nurses and locked the door and stayed there for 3 days with him.
Wow.
It's best to have a scenario where you can have the 3 days, and you can, and you know, I mean, if there's a bed that's spare in the hospital, like I know one hospital in Adelaide I went to, Vietnamese family had their own private room, and they allowed him to stay because they didn't need the bed, obviously. So you can be fortunate, you know.
Thank you for that explanation, and it's very precious. Thank you.
Good, sweetheart. Good. Anybody else? There. What about Christina?
Yes, Venerable. Janet had a question. What happens when you die suddenly with cardiac arrest?
Well, see, that's the thing. That's the whole point. The ideal way to die is to die slowly, okay? That's the ideal way. And of course, we can't guarantee that if we don't have the merit, don't have the virtuous karma. So we should practice our lives to wanting a peaceful death, to make all the conditions ready for a peaceful death, to die peacefully without fear. That's the ideal. But one of the scenarios in the book is, what if you die suddenly? That's exactly this. So you go through those 8 stages, but very quickly, obviously. And of course, and this is all the more reason why, you know, we want to be ready. So if you suddenly get, if you're in the middle of having your lunch and you're angry with your sister and you have a heart attack and die, that's not the way you want to die, baby. So of course, we can't guarantee we won't have we can't guarantee we will have a peaceful mind. But if the mind's very peaceful, if you're really peaceful and you're being loving to your sister at dinner, and then you have a heart attack, well then that'll trigger a virtuous karmic seed. It's up to what's in the mind at that time when the death happens. The mind, if it's virtuous, that'll trigger a virtuous seed. You're already programmed for a decent rebirth. If your mind's freaked out or panicked or whatever, or negative or angry, your mind it'll be triggering a negative seed, and you get a suffering rebirth. But what to do if you are the one taking care and your mother has a heart attack? You know, do what you can to help her be alive, do the machines or whatever, but keep your wits about you. And right there, as you're trying to work her out, you do mantras and prayers in her ear. You do that. You try to sort of also help her mind as much as you can, you know. Or if you stop off at an accident on a road where a person's dying, you try to do that. You try to say mantras while other people do the doctor thing. You do the thing to help their mind be peaceful. Do you understand me? Hope that helps. What's the other question, Christina?
Venerable, Diana had her hand up earlier.
Where are you, Diana? Talk to me, sweetheart.
Good,
darling. Talk to me, Diana.
I'm
Sweetheart.
in Adelaide. I remember at Buddha House said that when someone dies, you pull the tip of their hair, but I don't understand that. There was no explanation
No, I didn't
given.
mention that part. Let me discuss that. Yeah, that's kind of interesting, I know. It's sort of interesting because one of the things you can do before you move the body, this is the idea, before you move the body, you can check different ways to indicate whether the mind has left. And if you think the mind is still there and they have to take the body, what you could do, they say, you know, is very strongly pull the hair at where the tip of where the top of the central channel is. Because the idea is the very subtle consciousness, the clear light consciousness, is sitting in the heart chakra, in the center of the central channel. So tipping there, sort of like disturbing them in a way, pulling it very strongly at the crown chakra, that could cause the consciousness to zap up and leave through the crown chakra. There's another point. Where the mind leaves from the body is an indication, perhaps, of the type of rebirth. And this is very hard to know. So, for example, if the mind does leave through the central channel up the top here, that's an indication they could go to a Pure Land rebirth. If the mind leaves through the eyes, it would be a human birth. If the mind leaves, and we don't see this, it's too subtle. The very subtle consciousness leaves through the mouth, that's a spirit rebirth. If it leaves through the anus, that's a hell rebirth. If it leaves through the sex organ, that's an animal rebirth. That's how they say. So that's why not to touch the body, because if you're kissing your loved one, you're just going to activate their mind leave through there, which is attachment, and that'll give them a damn spirit rebirth. You don't want that. So not to disturb the body. The point is, even before they stop breathing, is the whole point I'm trying to get to. The mind, as your senses are getting weaker, your subtler, more mental consciousness is getting stronger. And that's why literally you could argue with Steve Jobs. His senses were going very quickly, his mental consciousness was there, and that incredible moment of love was the trigger for a virtuous karmic seed, and he's seeing a future, he's literally seeing a future rebirth. You talk about people seeing light. That's exactly what it's like. It's like, as Rinpoche said, it's like going towards the light. Many people who have death experiences talk like that. But so it's interesting. I remember reading years ago on the internet, 30 years ago, a film by an American doctor. This is very interesting. American doctor who was interviewing his patients about near-death experiences that were not white light. They were like hell experiences. So this one guy was in the hospital. He suddenly found himself walking along this tunnel, and at the end of it was this conflagration, this nightmarish fire, and all his loved ones all his friends in their human form, he could see them in hell, and they were screaming at him, "Go away, go away, go back." And he did, and he served Jesus, and you would. He had faith in God. The other one was this fellow in a hospital about to have had a heart operation. He was very worried about it, and he suddenly found himself, he was standing next to his wife, and he talked to her, and she didn't hear him, and he got annoyed with her, and then he looked at his bed and he saw his body there. So he's having what you call an out-of-body. But actually you're not. You see, this is the thing, your mind is not out of your body, but the experience, when you have a memory, think about it, you're seeing it from above or behind. You're not in it, you're seeing it from somewhere else. When you have dreams, it's like your mind isn't leaving. It's not like this weird experience, but your mind isn't leaving your body. If it leaves your body, you're dead. But that's the way mental consciousness has kind of visions, So this guy, he then heard this voice in the corridor, and he thought, oh good, they're asking me to come for my operation. So he goes, and this kind nurse taking him on the corridor, ugly, and rip his flesh out and abuse him. And what I first thought was so interesting, one thing he said was, the walk along that corridor took as long as walking from here to Alaska. Well, wherever here was, it must be, Alaska's a long way. So that's my experience. My feeling is that really shows about the experience of time. He could not have been, that whole experience was probably a few seconds. But so time, what's time? When you have only a mental consciousness, not the gross level. He said it was as long as walking from here to Alaska. Anyway, he was in the depth, and they left him, and he said he was in the depth of darkness and despair, the likes of which he'd never known, and he didn't know what to do. So then he thought, I'd better pray. And he couldn't remember prayers. He hadn't prayed since a little boy. He said, Our Father who art in heaven. He couldn't go any further. Then he said, the Lord is my shepherd, and he couldn't go any further. And then he just shouted, Jesus, help me. And then there's this light coming from a long way, tiny light, and it came closer and more radiant, and it was Jesus, and completely encompassed him, healed him, and he was in total bliss. And he wanted to go with Jesus. And he said, no, go back and serve me. And of course he did. So these are karmic visions, I mean, if Green Tara had turned up, he would have had a shock. So karmic appearances, this is your subtle mind. So what I'm getting at is many things there, actually. Karmic appearances, what you see, your mental consciousness, dreams is mental consciousness, coma is mental consciousness, and when you're dying, that's much more vivid. And so it's so important. This is one story, that's all. And the feeling of time, that experience of time was very fascinating to me. That really is it's very kind of dependent, you know. So, you know, as you're getting sicker and older, it's most important to keep calm and peaceful, not drugged out of their brains. That's not calm and peaceful. That's the tragedy. And not just stuffing them with, you know, these old people's homes where they're stuffed with television, blasting there all day. This is a nightmare, you know. You do not want that. That's attachment. It feeds nightmares attachment, you know. It's to help them be peaceful, and therefore to just be as a friend, as a supporter, just love them, make them feel secure, comfortable, peaceful, and have prayers and things to help their subtle mind, you know, which attracts the Buddhas. That's about the best I can say in our short period.
Venerable, there was just one more question about at the time of death that Rhea asked, sorry, just after death, is there a test to perform on the person to know that they have left, the consciousness has left?
That's what I'm saying. One of them is to put your hand just above their heart chakra in the center, and if it's warm, that shows the mind is still there. That's a good one. But it's interesting, I did that with my sister, and it wasn't that easy because it was only a few hours since she stopped breathing. And then the heat obviously was leaving the body anyway, and there was so much heat around her core, which of course would be true. So it was hard to know. But probably after an hour or days, or even a day, then all the heat from the body would have gone. But if there's still heat right in the center of the chest, that's a sign the mind is still there. That's a good one, I think. What else, people?
Can I ask a question, Venerable? It's Jerry.
Yes, go on, talk to me.
I'm just curious when you say not full of drugs. So if people die a long, slow death, often it's because they have cancer or something like that. And then they are in a lot of pain. So
yes,
I suppose.
No, I think Jerry, I think the point is it's important. What I meant by that was when we think of a person's drugged out of their brain and they're unconscious, that they're peaceful. And I think that's the point I'm making. I don't mean don't have drugs. Maybe, you know, organize it better. But just assuming that because the person's in a coma or the person's been drugged out so they're not conscious, just assuming they're peaceful, that's what I meant is not true. That's not true. That's what I'm saying.
So then, but if then people are on a lot of medication because of levels of pain, then
well, this is where, I mean, the ideal is to be conscious. The best way to die is to be conscious. But of course, you've got to try and navigate and work it out and find a way, the balance between being conscious and being pain-free, if you can. It's not always possible, is it?
Yeah.
Got to be aware of this. That's all I'm saying. You know,
Yeah.
do everything. I mean, it seems to be so clever these days with the drugs and everything. Being aware that just because you're drugged out and not looking like you're conscious. I know one time in Bendigo, I went to visit a person dying in the hospital. His wife, probably morphine. I don't know. He had cancer. And he wanted to hear prayers. And I know I had to shout at him and hold his hand. Can you hear me, Michael? And he could feel him coming up from this drugged out state, trying to get to the point where he can say yes. And he held my hand. So I shouted the prayers that he wanted to hear, because it's very hard when you're drugged out. I know one time when I had this terrible pains, I used to get these weird pains, and they took me to the hospital. I was in Melbourne, but they wouldn't give me, I know sometimes I'd have this pain, they'd stick steroids in, but this doctor wouldn't do that. So he put me on, what is it called, what I said?
Morphine.
It was a hideous experience. I did not want to die like that. My mind was out of control. I was hallucinating. It was the last thing I wanted. Okay, I maybe had pain less, but it was not a happy mind. It was not an experience. The idea is to be peaceful and calm if you can, you know, if you can.
I know this time to ask another question. In New South Wales now, like in other states in Australia, you can have voluntary assisted dying. My close dancing friend, his wife chose that because she'd been in hospital for 3.5 months and she was going to hell. So she chose that. And
to die, to kill herself. Yeah. You mean to kill herself?
Voluntary assisted dying, so they give her the drug to knock her out.
No, see, this is no. I mean, we have to stop the class. You know, we can talk a bit longer. But this is another whole discussion. You know, and this is the point about this one. Okay, say the basic points. It's not in the Buddhism. It's not a moralistic issue. Oh, you shouldn't kill somebody. It's a practical issue. And if we take the view that the consciousness will continue and to another rebirth, and we take the view that the time the death process starts, this intense attachment will kick in no matter who you are, unless you're a yogi, and that intense grasping is the condition that triggers the karmic seed that will determine your future life, then given that we're not clairvoyant, we have no certainty whether it's the pet or your mother, that their mind will be peaceful and that they have the right karma. It's like playing Russian roulette with a person. That's the main issue. Because you're not certain what will happen, and we just think, because we've got the right to kill ourselves, but we don't know the process. We don't know what's going to happen. So it's extremely dangerous for the person. This is just really.
She wanted, though. She really wanted it.
Don't care. I know. I'm not discussing that. I'm really not discussing that, Jerry. I'm not even saying she shouldn't have it. I'm just talking the Buddhist perspective. If one is informed by that perspective, we think of things differently. No, I'm not trying to make anybody do anything, wanting or not. I mean, it's not the issue. I'm just discussing the Buddhist perspective of what happens at death and what's important, to factor in. That's all I'm trying to say. Do you understand me?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So people, what do you think? Anything more? Any more questions?
There was a question. Oh yeah, sorry.
Go on.
If I was asked to help someone for voluntary assisted dying, as a Buddhist, I don't want to help them because that's like murder. That's killing, ending a life. But if I'm not a Buddhist, I would help them.
I understand, Diana. We have to make our own decisions, That's, isn't it? It's not an easy one, is it? I hope I'm never given that opportunity. I have to be clear about it. Do you understand? I understand. So people, darlings, I hope there's something useful. Maybe have another conversation on this topic because it's just practical. I mean, I know editing Rinpoche's book really helped me so much, look into it deeply, to all the factors involved. So it's important to look into it and think about it. So we just think, due to the virtue of listening to these teachings, may I quickly become a Buddha, just like me motivated, so I can be a benefit to others, and may compassion grow and grow in the hearts of all. And may all our holy teachers live long, long lives, and may Lama Zopa's smile come quickly. They found him already in Nepal, but we haven't any more details yet. So may he come back quickly, and may his smile beam upon us. Okay? That's it, everybody. Thank you, darlings.
Thank you.
And be ready for death. Get
Thank you
used to it. Be ready for death. Just get used to it, okay? Be ready for death. When you go to sleep tonight on the pillow, one day closer to death. And if you do die, make sure your mind's virtuous. And if you wake up in the morning, it's a bonus, and decide to use your life usefully. Be practical. Keep it there. And when we're more familiar with it, it doesn't stick in our face like the fear of death. It becomes integrated into our very being, and everything changes. So keep focused on that. Remember that, darlings. Much love, everybody.